I thought a proposal in the Charleston Gardens would finally be mine. No cameras, no audience, just a vintage ring. I once stared at through an antique window and the man I loved for 8 years, but when I called my mother Lorraine, she didn't ask how it happened or what I felt. She just sighed and said, "Did you tell Tessa yet she's delicate right now?" And that's how it began. A wedding that was never mine. A mother who called my boundaries selfish, a sister who messaged my fiancé, and a vow we had to take, barefoot on foreign sand, because home wouldn't let us be happy. There were no photographers hiding in the bushes, no crowd watching with hushed anticipation, no flash mobs or choreographed anything. It was just us. A quiet Sunday afternoon in early October. The trees were beginning to turn gold, dusting the edges of the leaves. A light breeze moved through the hanging moss like a whispered secret. Everything felt still sacred. We had taken the long path that curled around the koi pond, then wandered into a secluded grove where the ground was soft with fallen petals. I had paused to admire a bench tucked between 2 magnolia trees. When I turned, Owen was already kneeling in front of me, his hands slightly shaking but his smile steady. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. We'd been together for nearly 7 years. The love was already there, worn in like favorite denim. He opened the box slowly, and inside was a ring I hadn't seen in months, but instantly recognized. A vintage band, simple and elegant, the kind I'd once stopped to admire in the dusty window of a tiny antique shop on King Street. I hadn't even pointed it out seriously. I just laughed and said I liked rings that looked like they had lived through a few good stories. Not ones that sparkled for attention, but ones that stayed quietly beautiful through time. I remember the exact feeling that ran through me when I saw it in his hands. Not shock. Not even tears. Just stillness. The kind that happens when everything for once aligns. I said yes. Of course I did. He stood, we kissed, and that was it. No cheering, no camera clicks. Just the soft rustle of wind through trees and the sound of our hearts syncing up again. We celebrated afterward with sweet tea and fried green tomatoes at a small diner near the harbor, the kind with cracked leather booths and waitresses who called you Han. It wasn't fancy, but it felt right. We held hands across the table and joked about the worst wedding themes we could come up with. Viking chic, clown formal, cat cafe couture. For those few hours, it felt like the world belonged to just us. No one knew yet. It was ours alone. The next morning, I woke up wrapped in Owen's hoodie, my feet tucked under his legs, my ring catching the first light coming through the kitchen window of our apartment. He was still asleep, arm across my waist, breathing slow and even. I lay there for a long time just watching him, thinking, this is what safety feels like. After making coffee, I stepped out onto the small balcony, phone in hand, and dialed my mother. She picked up on the third ring. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. Her voice was clipped but pleasant. "Are you calling from work?" "No," I said and smiled. I waited a moment. "I have news." A pause. Just long enough to notice. "Owen proposed yesterday. At the gardens. It was beautiful." I said yes. Silence. "Have you told Tessa yet?" The words landed like ice water down my back. "What Tessa?" she repeated slower, like I might have forgotten who my own sister was. "You know she's still fragile. With everything that happened with Drew, it's been a hard year. You should tell her soon. Carefully." That was all. "No." "Congratulations." "No." "Tell me everything." No joy in her voice, just concern for Tessa. I blinked, looking down at my coffee cooling in my hand. I could hear the clink of dishes in the background, the distant murmur of the television. She was multitasking, as always, as if I had interrupted her with something trivial. "Right," I managed. "I'll call her." "That's good," she said. "She'll probably take it better coming from you directly." Take it better, as if my engagement was a bombshell. As if my happiness was a threat. I hung up a few minutes later, politely, calmly, my voice never cracking. I even thanked her for picking up. When I set the phone down, my hands felt cold. A minute later, Owen walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Everything okay?" She asked if I told Tessa yet. I said. Owen leaned against the counter, reading my expression. "That's all. That's all." He didn't say anything else. He just came over and pulled me into a hug. I let him. I needed it more than I wanted to admit. We spent the rest of the day sketching out ideas for the wedding. Not details, just big picture stuff. Mountains or coast, small or smaller. He joked we could just elope and skip the drama. I laughed, but there was a tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head. "Have you told Tessa yet?" She didn't ask about the ring. Didn't ask how he proposed. Didn't ask how I felt. It was as if my moment had to be measured against someone else's pain before it was allowed to matter. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was caught off guard. Maybe she'd call back later with excitement. Maybe she was just trying to be protective. But I knew better. It wasn't the first time my joy had come second to my sister's sorrow. And deep down I knew it wouldn't be the last. So we moved forward anyway. We booked a small mountain lodge outside Asheville for mid-January. The kind of place with creaking floors, fireplaces in every room, and views that made silence feel like music. 90 guests, mostly close friends, and a few cousins I still trusted. The color palette was soft blue and ivory wintry, but warm just like I wanted. Wild roses, candlelight, handmade pies instead of a cake. No spotlight, no staged moments, just intentional joy. Owen loved the idea of a live folk trio. Naomi, my best friend since college, volunteered to coordinate the bridal party details. Even my coworkers at Harlan Media surprised me with a bottle of champagne and a bouquet the day I told them. There was a current of peace running under it all, like things were finally moving towards something that was mine. Then 6 weeks later, Tessa announced her engagement. It came through Instagram as always. A sunset rooftop photo in Charlotte. Her in a tight backless lace dress holding hands with a man I had never seen before. The caption read, "When you know you know." January can't come fast enough. I stared at the screen unmoving. The man was tagged as Drew Wallace, a DJ with a curated feed of neon-lit clubs and shirtless mirror selfies. They'd been dating less than 2 months. Apparently, they had met at a product launch for a local lifestyle brand, one Tessa had posted about relentlessly during the summer. No prior mentions of him. No soft introduction. Just that picture and that caption. I didn't say anything to her. Not when she announced the venue 2 weeks later, a modern rustic winery just outside of Asheville. Not when I realized it was a 12-minute drive from ours. Not when she posted a bouquet mock-up almost identical to the one I had chosen with our florist, a woman named Maribel I'd been working with for over a month. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Tessa had always loved the aesthetic I leaned toward, but claimed it didn't suit her. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe it was subconscious. Then Naomi called me late one evening after scrolling through her own feed. "Have you seen Tessa's new post?" I opened it. There she stood in a long lacy gown with cap sleeves and an open back. My design. The one I had described in detail to Naomi and had chosen privately with Maribel weeks before Tessa got engaged. My phone buzzed again. A text from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Didn't you already pick that dress style?" Another message. "That's your venue, right?" The knot in my chest grew tighter. I tried to laugh it off. I replied politely. "Just a funny coincidence." Sisters, right, but inside I felt something twist. Not jealousy, not even anger. Just that same dull ache I had carried since childhood. The one that shows up when your presence is not just overlooked but overwritten. Like a page being erased and replaced while your hand is still holding the pen. It wasn't new. Tessa had always had a flair for spectacle. When we were kids, she once cried to a teacher that I had hit her just because I got a better grade. I was 12. She was 5. I got detention. She got ice cream. At 16, she wrecked my stepdad's car. Lied. Let me take the fall until he found the keys scratched down the side and caught her in another story. Even then, I had covered for her. There was always a reason. She was sensitive. She was going through something. She didn't mean it like that. Now she was booking florists I had already hired trying on dresses. I had quietly chosen and inviting people from circles we both shared. Friends started asking questions. I started losing sleep. Owen tried to be neutral. He told me she's probably grasping for attention. It'll pass. But he didn't grow up like I did. He didn't know what it meant when Tessa latched onto something that was supposed to be mine. She didn't just borrow, she consumed. By early November, she had finalized her date. January 11th. Ours was January 18th, a week apart. 2 weddings, 2 sisters, 1 town. The same florist. The same style. The same theme. I sat in Maribel's tiny studio flipping through the binder of floral arrangements I had spent weeks curating and asked her carefully if she was working both weddings. She paused. Tessa reached out a few days ago, she said, eyes apologetic. I hadn't realized you two were sisters. It's okay, I lied. You're great at what you do. She smiled, relieved. I walked to my car in the cold and sat there for a long time, keys in my hand, staring out the windshield. For the first time, I didn't know if I wanted to keep planning this wedding. Not because I didn't love Owen. Not because I wasn't ready. But because I could already feel the narrative slipping away from me. This was supposed to be our story. But somehow I had the sinking feeling that once again I would end up as the footnote in someone else's headline. Tessa got married on the first Saturday of January. It was streamed live on 2 platforms. She wore a new designer gown, not the cap-sleeve vintage lace she had flaunted months earlier, but a sheer high-neck creation that looked like it belonged in a winter editorial shoot. The venue was covered in white draping and pale blue lighting, an aesthetic remarkably similar to the one I had originally envisioned, only louder. More curated, more performative. I watched 15 minutes of it from my laptop, curled up on the couch with a throw blanket pulled over my knees. Owen was in the kitchen making coffee, and I didn't say a word. Tessa's voice drifted from the speakers, sweet and trembly, thanking Drew for rescuing her heart. I closed the screen before the vows ended. I didn't want to know if they said the same lines we had planned. She didn't invite me. Not formally. I received no card, no text. Only the link Naomi forwarded to me that morning with a short message, thought you'd want to know. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything sharp. Just that same strange hollowness, like watching a dress rehearsal of a life I thought was mine. A knockoff of a story I had started telling first. 2 months later, the marriage collapsed. Drew had been cheating with one of Tessa's closest friends, a fellow influencer with perfect teeth and a skincare line. The fallout was loud. Instagram stories with tears, cryptic captions, unfollowing sprees, a podcast episode titled How to Heal When They Lie. By mid-March, the divorce filing was public. Tessa posted a video where she whispered through sniffles about betrayal, soul fractures, and growing in private. Comments poured in. So brave. You deserve better. Healing looks good on you. I watched all of it in silence. Then I sent a text. Just one. If you need anything, I'm here. She never replied. Owen said nothing about it when I told him. Just placed a glass of wine beside me and kissed my hair. We didn't talk much about Tessa. It had become a quiet rule between us. Mention her name only when necessary, and even then gently, like you might spook something delicate. Still, in the weeks after the split, I waited for some shift. For my mother to call and say, Camille, your time now. Camille, let's talk dresses. Camille, I'm proud of you. Instead, she called me on a Thursday in early May. Her voice was light, too light, the way it always was when she was winding into a request. I've been thinking, she said, and I just wonder, have you considered scaling the wedding back a bit? I blinked at my laptop screen. A half-finished email to our caterer open in front of me. What do you mean? Just something smaller, Lorraine said. Maybe a chapel. Something intimate. Close family. Simple. It's just. Tessa's still going through so much. Every time she sees something about the wedding, she gets emotional. Mom, I said carefully, I've been planning this for almost a year. Everything's booked. I know, she said quickly. It's just. Maybe a smaller celebration would feel more appropriate, given what your sister is dealing with. There it was. Again. My joy held hostage by someone else's pain. She cried last night, Lorraine added, when she saw your invitation mock-up. Said it felt like salt in a wound. I let the silence stretch until it pulled tight. I haven't even mailed them yet. I know, but still. She knows it's coming. If you loved your sister, really loved her, you'd wait until she's stronger. I hung up shortly after. Politely. Like always. That evening, Owen walked in with Thai takeout and set it on the kitchen counter. Your mom called me, he said. I stopped mid-sip of water. What she said, she thought I was the reasonable one. That maybe I'd help you see why a big wedding right now would hurt Tessa. She asked me to talk to you. To talk you out of it. My stomach turned. What did you say? I told her we're not changing anything. I sat down hard on the edge of the couch. My hands had gone cold. It wasn't just about Tessa's feelings anymore. It was control. Guilt wrapped in concern. Soft pressure disguised as protection. I had seen it before. When I chose a college across the country and she asked if I didn't love them enough to stay close. When I took a promotion and she wondered if that meant I wouldn't have time for holidays. Every decision that moved me forward became a betrayal in her eyes. Now she was using Owen. Calling him behind my back. Painting me as the insensitive one, the difficult daughter, the selfish sister. I stared at the dark window, the reflection of my own face just faint enough to make me flinch. I had been here before, but this time I wasn't 12 and scared of losing their approval. I wasn't 19 and desperate to keep the peace. I wasn't 28 and exhausted by every holiday dinner ending in a silent war. This time I was 34, and I was done trading my happiness for their comfort. We got the Thanksgiving invite from Aunt Ruth in mid-October. Owen was the one who read the card aloud at the kitchen counter, his voice, even his expression, unreadable. I already knew it was coming. Ruth hosted every other year, and after everything that had happened with Tessa's divorce, it made sense for the family to rally. I placed the card in the junk drawer without comment. The plan was to decline. I had already started drafting a polite excuse. Work deadlines. Pre-wedding errands. A destination honeymoon planning call. But then 2 weeks before the holiday, Owen looked at me across the table and said gently, "You have every right to be there." I wanted to say no. Wanted to curl into the comfort of silence, let them gather and perform their traditions without me. But something about the way he said it, no judgment, just quiet conviction, made me pause. So we went. The drive to Millbrook was over 2 hours. Cold sunlight spilled over bare trees and the sky was a dull sheet of gray. The closer we got to Ruth's house, the tighter my chest became. My fingers curled around the seatbelt like it could anchor me to something steadier than my own spine. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw familiar cars lined up along the curb. Lorraine's silver SUV, Dad's old Navy sedan, and Tessa's new white hybrid parked perfectly at the front like a showroom display. Inside the house was warm, but somehow still chilly. Not in temperature, but in tone. Ruth greeted us with a hug and a kind smile. She was always the softest of my mother's sisters, the one who sent birthday cards and never forgot the details I shared in passing. Her kitchen smelled like nutmeg and cinnamon, and for a moment I let myself pretend we were just another family with ordinary tension, nothing more. "Camille, you look radiant," she said as she ushered us in. "Tell me about the florist. Did you end up choosing hydrangeas?" I smiled and nodded, grateful for her lightness. We stood near the kitchen island chatting about arrangements and seasonal palettes while the others drifted in and out of earshot. Tessa arrived 20 minutes later wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and a long silk skirt. Her makeup was subtle but deliberate, her hair twisted into a soft bun. She looked like a lifestyle ad come to life, all muted tones and curated sadness. She barely glanced in my direction. Most of the afternoon passed in brittle civility. I helped Ruth set the table. Owen refilled drinks. Lorraine floated from room to room commenting on centerpieces and pie textures, pretending nothing was amiss. We sat down to dinner just after 4. I was placed across from Tessa diagonally, which felt like a statement. She avoided my eyes, instead speaking softly to our cousin Maddie about a meditation app and the benefits of salt lamps. I focused on my plate. Turkey stuffing, roasted carrots. The same meal we had every year, but this time it tasted like cardboard. Halfway through dinner, as Ruth passed around the cranberry sauce, Tessa suddenly put down her fork and wiped under her eye. "I don't know how to do this," she said, quietly. Everyone froze. I tried to keep eating, but the clatter of silence was deafening. She sniffled loud now and said, louder this time, "I mean, how am I supposed to sit here like she didn't erase me? Like she didn't pretend I don't exist?" Her voice cracked. I looked up. She was staring straight at me. All I had done was talk to Ruth. All I had done was exist in the same room. Lorraine moved fast. She was beside Tessa in a heartbeat, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, murmuring something about how strong she was, how unfair it all felt. Then she turned to me. "Camille, really? Is this who you are now?" I blinked. Fork still in hand. The air left my lungs like a sudden gust had punched me square in the chest. "She's still healing," Lorraine said. "You know that, and you act like she's invisible. Like none of this matters." I took a breath, steady and slow. "I am not responsible for how she processes her marriage ending," I said quietly. Tessa made a sound. Half gasp, half sob. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "I'm not going to apologize for having a wedding," I continued, voice calm. "And I will not shrink to make room for someone else's recovery arc." Lorraine opened her mouth, but I raised a hand gently. "My wedding is not a stage for someone else's healing." No one spoke. Even the clinking of forks had stopped. I placed my napkin on the table and turned to Ruth. "Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." "Camille," Ruth started, but I shook my head. "I need to go." Owen stood too. His hand found mine as we walked out past the stunned faces and untouched pie. We didn't speak until we were back in the car, seat belts fastened, the engine warming. The windows fogged slowly with our breath. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon. The sky was the color of steel wool. I stared straight ahead, pulse steady now, but heart a little sore. Owen reached over and laced his fingers with mine. "You okay?" I nodded, then shook my head. "I think I finally understand," I said. "It doesn't matter how gently I step. Some people will always hear it as stomping." He gave my hand a squeeze. "And some people, no matter how much you bend, will never meet you halfway." I looked out the window as Ruth's porch light disappeared behind us. Somewhere in that warm house, dessert was being served, stories exchanged, maybe even laughter rising again like nothing had happened. But I wasn't part of that performance anymore. And that strangely felt like relief. I stayed up all night, not pacing, not crying, just sitting in stillness at the edge of our bed while the city lights blinked against the blinds. At some point, the coffee from hours ago had gone cold on the dresser, untouched. I wasn't waiting for peace. I was claiming it. By dawn, I opened my laptop and started typing, the cursor blinking steadily like a metronome. The email to my mother was short. "Dear Mom, after repeated boundary violations and emotional manipulation, I have decided to rescind your invitation to our wedding. This decision is final and made to preserve my own well-being. Camille." I copied this same message to Tessa and hit send. No emotion, no drama, no explanation beyond what they already knew. It was not an act of cruelty. It was self-preservation. The first response came less than an hour later. My mother, Lorraine, replied with a single sentence. Your father would be ashamed to see you turning your back on blood. That was her pattern. Not concern, not understanding, but guilt dressed as moral superiority. I didn't answer. An hour after that, Tessa's email arrived. It was nearly 8 paragraphs long. There were no greetings, no punctuation in some places, and far too many exclamation marks in others. It read like a stream of chaos disguised as sincerity. You think you're so above it all. I've been struggling and you couldn't even be kind. You cut us off like we're disposable. You're breaking this family apart, Camille. I needed you, and all you could think about was a stupid party with fairy lights and gluten-free cupcakes. I don't even know who you are anymore. I read it twice slowly. Not because it hurt, but because I was trying to figure out if there was any part of her that actually understood what she was saying. There wasn't. I archived the email, then created a folder on my desktop labeled Wedding Emails. I saved both hers and my mother's inside it. Not out of spite, but because I wanted to remember the exact moment I stopped explaining myself. For the next few weeks, our lives returned to a soft, deliberate rhythm. I worked on the seating chart, finalized the playlist with our violinist, and Owen and I went for long walks through Piedmont Park. We talked about the dance floor, the signature cocktails, the garden arch I wanted built by hand. I even started sleeping through the night again. But the silence was temporary. One Thursday afternoon, Owen came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen barefoot folding linen napkins into soft triangles when I heard the front door click shut. He didn't call out. That was the first sign. When he finally entered the kitchen, he wasn't carrying his bag. He had his phone in his hand, his jaw tight. I froze. Owen set the phone down on the counter between us, the screen already lit. You need to see this. I picked it up slowly. There it was. A Facebook post from my aunt's account, public with over 100 likes. A long caption talking about the joyous bridal brunch thrown by Lorraine Prescott for her youngest daughter and how it was such a blessing to watch the family come together after so much heartache. Underneath were photos. Tessa glowing in white again, surrounded by women I recognized. Aunts, cousins, even one of my old roommates from college. All of them smiling, holding champagne flutes, seated around a long table adorned with baby's breath and lavender. There were name cards at every place setting. Except mine. I wasn't invited. I stared at one photo for too long. Tessa's hands clasped with Lorraine's, both mid-laughter, with a cake in front of them that read in pink cursive, "To fresh beginnings." I placed the phone down gently. They're rewriting the story, I said softly. Owen looked at me, his eyes full of anger he didn't know where to place. You okay? I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. But I nodded. It wasn't that I wanted to be there, I didn't. But seeing them gather without me celebrating something that had been born from the ashes of someone else's marriage, pretending like their cruelty had no consequences, it was a sharp, familiar sting. And then it hit me. They weren't mourning the absence of my wedding, they were replacing it. I turned back to the napkins, continued folding. Cam, Owen said, stepping closer. I'm fine, I whispered. Really? But I wasn't folding anymore. I was counting. Each fold was an anchor to stop myself from drifting into that space I used to live in. The space where I would bend myself backward, erase my needs, apologize for taking up room. Not this time. I set the last napkin down and looked up at Owen. They don't get to hurt me, then celebrate. He nodded slowly. What do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. Because the answer wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. I wanted to create a space they couldn't infect. I wanted to walk into my wedding without flinching. Let's move the date, I said finally. He raised an eyebrow. To when? Soon. But not here. Not in North Carolina. Not anywhere they could find their way in. He blinked. You're serious, I smiled. Dead serious. We booked the tickets to Kauai 3 days later. It wasn't dramatic, no big announcement. Just a quiet decision between two people who were tired of letting others steal the joy out of every milestone. We found a small eco-resort tucked into the hills above the beach, and the woman who ran it said she had hosted only 2 weddings before. That was perfect. I didn't want glitter or fireworks or some viral moment on TikTok. I wanted peace. And I wanted the vows said somewhere they couldn't poison. We didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not even Owen's parents. For a while, it worked. I would wake up and listen to the breeze slip through the window, open my laptop to check design plans, and feel like maybe, just maybe, we had stepped out of the storm. Then one morning, Owen was already dressed when I walked into the kitchen. He had coffee ready, but his expression was unreadable. His phone was face down on the counter, and he wasn't drinking anything. What is it? He didn't answer right away, just picked up the phone and unlocked it. Then he slid it across the table to me. It was a screenshot. From Tessa, the message read, "You are always the only one who really understood me." I blinked. Underneath it, he had replied with nothing. I looked at him. "That's new," I said quietly. He nodded. "There's more." He showed me the next one. Sent the day after. If only we had met before she did. There was no ambiguity, no jokes or winks or plausible deniability. Just a woman pushing a boundary that never belonged to her. And the final message sent at 2:30 in the morning, just one sentence. "Don't pretend there's nothing between us. You know there is." I felt the muscles in my chest tighten, not with anger, but with something colder. "And you never answered any of these?" I asked. He shook his head. "Number." Not a word. I stared at the screen again. There it was in plain text. The truth behind all the chaos, the manipulation, the bridal brunch, and crocodile tears. This wasn't about being hurt. This was about control. She couldn't be the bride, so she tried to become the drama. I scrolled back up, rereading the messages one by one. They weren't just inappropriate, they were calculated. Written like bait. Like she was testing how far she could push before someone pushed back. Owen watched me carefully, waiting for me to say something. "I'm not angry at you," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "I know this wasn't yours to fix." He looked relieved but still unsettled. "I just hate that she's still trying to twist something decent," he said quietly. "Like nothing is sacred." I nodded slowly. "She doesn't want you. She just wants me to lose." We sat in silence for a while. Not defeated, just tired. Then I stood, took the phone, and walked into my office. I opened a new email, typed in my mother's address, and attached each screenshot one by one. No commentary, no passive aggression. Just facts. When they were all attached, I typed a single sentence. "Still think this is about me lacking empathy." Then I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't expect one. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Lorraine. I let it go to voicemail. Then, another. Then, a text. "Please call me." I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the screenshots to my lawyer just in case this turned into another firestorm. I wasn't naive anymore. I knew how quickly someone like Tessa could flip the narrative. By evening, Owen and I were back on the couch watching some documentary neither of us was following. "You okay?" he asked for the second time that day. "I am now," I said, and I meant it. Because there's something strangely clarifying about seeing the rot in the open. It makes you stop questioning your gut. It makes you stop hoping they'll change. Later that night, I scrolled through my email and noticed something odd. A calendar invite. From Tessa. It was titled Rehearsal Dinner with a date 2 weeks out. The location was some upscale vineyard outside Asheville. It had 25 people listed, most of them family, some I didn't recognize. She had sent it to me by mistake. Or maybe not. I stared at it. There was no message. Just the invite. Like she was daring me to crash it. I hit decline. I shut the laptop, walked to the window, and looked out at the trees swaying against the moonlight. And for the first time in months, I felt untouchable. I wasn't afraid of what she might do next. Because now I had receipts and peace. And that was a dangerous combination. Let her spiral. I wasn't joining her. 3 days later, I was called into Daniel Forsyth's office. Daniel was the executive director at Harland Media Group, sharp as a knife and just as quick. He wasn't the type to summon people without cause, and I hadn't missed a deadline in 7 years. When I walked in, he didn't smile. "Close the door, Camille." I did. He motioned toward the chair across from his desk. There was a file open in front of him, but he wasn't looking at it. He was watching me. "Is there something I should know about your engagement?" I blinked. "Excuse me," he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "A woman contacted me anonymously. Said your upcoming wedding is a stunt. That it's part of some PR play to position you and your fiancé as a brand couple. That you're using Harland resources to boost your personal image." I felt my stomach twist. That's insane. That's not true. Who would even? She said she was your mother. The air left my lungs. He watched my face for a reaction, probably expecting one. But I was too stunned to react. She claimed your relationship is fabricated. That your fiancé is being paid. That the wedding is a corporate tie-in for exposure. Her words. "That's a lie," I said, my voice firm but low. "I would never exploit my personal life for work. And Owen. He's not part of any scheme. He's a person. My person." Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "I thought so, but I had to ask." My hands were clenched in my lap. "Did she give you any proof?" He shook his head. "Just a rambling email. No evidence, no real structure. But she mentioned enough names and internal projects that I couldn't ignore it." I looked at the file on his desk. "May." He nodded. I scanned the printout. It was every bit as unhinged as I expected. Lines about how I never cared about family. How I used holidays for networking. How I planned the wedding to sabotage Tessa's own social standing. Then the final paragraph: I raised Camille to be strong. But now she uses that strength to hurt the people who love her. Maybe you should look into how she's using your platform. I closed the file and slid it back. Daniel rubbed his temple. "Camille, I'm not going to take any of this seriously. You have my full support. But people talk. And perception is a fragile thing. I understand. And you might want to get ahead of this. Before it spreads." I nodded and stood. "Thank you for telling me." Back at my desk, I sat frozen for several minutes. It wasn't just sabotage anymore. This was war. By evening, I was still reeling when Naomi called. Her voice was tight. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. "I will be." She sighed. "I wasn't going to tell you this today, but I think you need to know. Tessa's been posting about me." "What, on her backup account?" "The one with the soft filter pictures and wellness quotes." She posted a photo from last year's bachelorette party. Captioned it something like, "Some friends only show up when the champagne flows. They don't protect family, they just play favorites." I swallowed. It had hundreds of likes. And a few comments that mentioned me directly. One said I was a snake. Another said I was exploiting your name to push my influencer stuff. Naomi's voice cracked slightly. "Camille, I can handle trolls. But your sister is making me a target. She's turning your wedding into a war zone." "I know. And I hate this. Because I wanted to be there. Fully, joyfully, as your friend. Not someone dodging knives on the internet." "You still can be," I said softly. "But I understand if you need space. Number, I'm not bailing. I'm just hurt. And angry. And tired." "Me too." We sat in silence for a beat. "She's trying to make it about her," Naomi said. Again. "I know. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet." But I was. Later that night, Owen found me packing a small box of stationery and wedding favors into a drawer. "Are we canceling?" "No," I said. "We're reclaiming." He looked confused. "If we keep inviting people into this story, they'll keep rewriting it. I'm done giving them that pen." "So what does that mean?" I met his eyes. It means we finish what we started. Our way, just us. And maybe a few people who never needed a spotlight to show they cared. He nodded slowly. Camille. Yeah. If you want to walk away from all of it, the wedding, the spectacle, I'd marry you tomorrow on the beach with nothing but driftwood and salt air. I smiled for the first time that day. Let's sleep on it. But I already knew. This wasn't just about a ceremony anymore. It was about taking back the parts of my life they kept trying to auction off. My love wasn't for sale. My peace wasn't negotiable. And no matter what they did next, I had already drawn the line. Let them try to cross it. It was nearly midnight when Owen and I sat at the dining table, the glow of our laptop screens reflecting off the untouched glasses of wine. The budget spreadsheet was open, rows and rows of deposits, vendor notes, menu edits, seating charts. I stared at the numbers but couldn't feel anything anymore. It all looked sterile, like it belonged to someone else's wedding. Owen rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Do we really want to do this here? I didn't answer right away. The word here meant more than just Portland. It meant this version of our wedding. This plan we had built out of obligation, out of tradition, out of the thin hope that maybe they'd meet us halfway. My phone buzzed. It was Naomi. I picked up and heard her breathing hard, like she had just walked away from something she didn't want to be part of. Camille. I just wanted to warn you. Tessa posted again. She said she's coming to the wedding whether she's invited or not. And your mom commented. Said she was too. That no matter what they'll be there to correct what's been twisted. I closed my eyes. Of course they would. Naomi kept going. She's framing it like you're the one being manipulative. Like she's rescuing the family name. And your mom. I don't even know who she is anymore. She said I raised a daughter. Now I barely recognize her. I swallowed. Thanks for telling me. Naomi hesitated. Camille, do you still want this? I glanced over at Owen, who is now watching me quietly. I think I want something else. When I hung up, I looked at him. What if we didn't do this? Didn't do what? This wedding. This spectacle. This performance for people who aren't rooting for us. He tilted his head. Okay. So what are we doing instead? I opened my laptop and typed in a single word Bahamas. Owen smiled. I like where this is going. I clicked through pages of private resorts, beach rentals, charter flights. Each photo felt like a breath of fresh air. A space that wasn't poisoned by expectation. I want to get married where no one brings knives in their smiles. Where no one is rehearsing their speech for the gossip column. Owen laughed. I'd marry you in a gas station parking lot if it meant peace. I looked at the calendar. December was 2 weeks away. Not the ideal season for a big change, but perfect for an escape. We won't tell everyone, I said. Just the people who matter. The ones who didn't ask for drama in return for love. So we wrote a message. Simple. Honest. Change of plans. We're getting married in the Bahamas. No chaos. No seating charts. Just joy. Come if you can. We'd love you there. We sent it to 6 people. Naomi. My cousin, Ashley. Owen's sister, Rachel. His best friend, Theo. My college roommate, Jess. And Mateo, my old neighbor who'd become like family. Within an hour, every single one of them replied. Not a single question. Just I'm in. Can't wait. I'll be there. The next morning, we started canceling. The florist. The venue in Lake Oswego. The jazz trio. The rehearsal dinner. I half expected to feel guilt or hesitation. But it felt like shedding a costume. When we told Daniel at work, he just smiled. Good for you. Sounds like the story you're writing is finally yours. Naomi stopped by that evening with a tiny carry-on suitcase. I'm flying out with you, she said. I don't trust the universe to behave unless I'm personally watching it. She hugged me tight, and when she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. You did the brave thing, Camille. You stopped asking for permission. It wasn't bravery. It was survival. My mother called twice that day. Left a voicemail. If you think running away will solve anything, think again. I didn't reply. Tessa texted once. Wow. How convenient. Can't handle facing the people you've hurt. I didn't reply to that either. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing. 2 days later, Owen and I stood barefoot on a quiet beach, soft waves touching our ankles. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky with orange and lavender. Naomi handed me a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked that morning. Ashley adjusted my hair clip, Jess wiped tears before they even fell. Mateo offered a wink from behind the camera. Rachel and Theo held hands like the world had never been loud. No chairs, no podium, no forced toasts, just sand. Laughter, wind. And vows spoken from memory. Owen looked at me steady and sure. You saved me, he whispered. You made me feel like more than enough. I said mine through a smile that hurt from holding back tears. You were never the storm. You were the shelter. We kissed, and the world quieted. Behind us, no audience waited for an ending. Because this wasn't one. It was the first time I had made a decision without waiting for someone to clap, and I had never felt more free. The morning light poured through the gauzy white curtains, soft and golden. The sound of waves was steady, almost like a metronome anchoring my breath. I sat by the window in a cotton robe, watching Naomi fuss with bobby pins and a small curling wand she'd somehow tucked into her carry-on. Her fingers were steady, but her eyes were a little misty. You know you're the first bride I've ever styled. She smiled through the mirror. And the first to pick a wedding with no dress code and no seating chart. I grinned. That's because this isn't about anyone else. Just him. Just us. She tucked the last pin in and smoothed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Well, you look like the kind of woman who chooses herself. Finally, a knock on the door. It was Claire. She stepped in with a leather folder, barefoot, her blazer traded for a linen shirt and flowy pants. Vows are prepped if you're still going through with this, she said with a teasing smirk. I took the folder from her hands. We are. Definitely. Claire had flown in the night before offering to officiate when we found out the resort's usual officiant was stuck in customs. You sure you're okay doing this without a courtroom? I had joked. She had just replied, love is the most binding contract I know. And this one doesn't need witnesses who doubt its value. Now she glanced down at my bare feet. You're going like that? I wiggled my toes against the tile. I figured if I can walk away from my past, I can walk into my future without heels. She chuckled, then nodded toward the window. He's out there. He hasn't stopped pacing. I peeked between the curtain slats. Owen stood near the shoreline, his back to us, suit pants rolled up to his calves, shirt sleeves, cuffed, holding a single white flower. He looked calm. Sure. As if he'd been standing on that beach all his life just waiting for me to show up. My heart thudded once deep and slow. Naomi placed her hand on my shoulder. It's just a walk, she whispered. And you've already taken longer steps than this. I nodded. I stepped outside. The sand was warm underfoot, soft and a little damp. The sky above was clear pale blue. A handful of chairs had been placed in a wide circle, not in rows. Everyone was barefoot. Rachel waved. Mateo held up his camera. Ashley and Jess clapped their hands once when they saw me, but then fell quiet again, letting the moment speak for itself. I walked slowly. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to remember every second. Each footstep felt like a promise to myself. Claire stood by the water, smiling, a folder in one hand and a shell in the other. Owen turned. And I forgot how to breathe. He looked at me like the world had finally stopped spinning. Like there was nowhere else he'd rather be. I reached him and he took my hands. His palms were warm, solid, familiar. Claire began speaking, but her voice felt like wind, soft and distant. All I could hear was Owen's breath. All I could feel was his thumb brushing the side of my hand. Do you want to say your vows first? Claire asked me. I nodded. I looked at him. I don't have a perfect past. I don't have a family who cheered me on or a home full of photo albums. But I have you. And in you, I found something better than perfection. I found someone who listened, who stayed, who never made me feel small for wanting more. I'm not promising you ease or predictability, but I am promising you honesty, laughter, a hand to hold when things fall apart, and a voice that will never disappear when things go quiet. He blinked fast, nodded once, then cleared his throat. Camille, you came into my life like a soft answer I didn't know I was waiting for. You reminded me that strength doesn't mean silence. That love isn't control, it's release. I vow to never ask you to shrink. I vow to grow beside you, to listen when I'm wrong, and to celebrate when you win. I'll love you loud even on the days the world tries to dim you. Claire took a step closer. Then, by the power not vested in me by any state but granted freely by your love, I pronounce you married. Not as a declaration of ownership, but as a celebration of choice. You may kiss, he did, and I let go. Not of him, but of everything else. No cameras were shoved in our faces. No aunt whispered that the dress was too simple. No mother watched through narrowed eyes. No sister made a scene. It was quiet. Just salt and wind and joy. Later that night, we sat around a bonfire roasting marshmallows and sipping chilled wine. Someone had brought a Bluetooth speaker. Naomi played our favorite song. Mateo started a slow clap, pulling us up to dance. Owen spun me once, then held me close. You know what my favorite part of today was, he whispered. What? That we didn't ask anyone's permission. We didn't need it. I nodded. We wrote the story. And no one tried to edit it. In the distance, someone lit a sky lantern. It drifted upward, steady glowing. I watched it float until it vanished into the dark. That night, when we curled into each other under white cotton sheets, and the windows opened to the sound of waves, I thought for the first time in years, this is what freedom feels like when it's not something you have to justify. And it felt like home. The morning after our wedding, I woke up with the scent of salt still in my hair and the sound of waves brushing against the shore just outside our window. Owen was still asleep, one arm draped across my waist, his breathing slow and steady. I slipped out of bed, gently letting him rest, and padded barefoot to the small deck that overlooked the beach. The sky was a soft gray blue, the kind that promised a calm day ahead. I wrapped a shawl over my shoulders and sat down on the cushioned bench, phone in hand. I hadn't looked at it in almost 24 hours. A part of me didn't want to, but curiosity or maybe just closure tugged. 18 missed calls. 3 voicemails. Most from my mother. 1 from Tessa. The screen lit up again as a text came through. From Lorraine. You will regret this. Friends can't replace blood. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of shock, more out of awe. Even now she believed her version of truth deserved a reply. I deleted it. I didn't open the voicemails. I didn't even listen for tone. I knew what they'd say. I knew how they'd spin it. The language of guilt was one I had learned too fluently, and I had no desire to rehearse it anymore. The sliding door behind me opened. Naomi stepped out, coffee in hand, wrapped in a fluffy white robe. Her hair was tousled from sleep, but her eyes were already sharp. She sat beside me without speaking at first, then took a sip and exhaled. Well, your sister just went live. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She was crying. A lot of mascara. Not enough accountability. Said you ruined the family. Said you turned people against her. Said you won. I waited for a flicker of reaction to rise. It didn't. Naomi looked at me surprised. That's it. No rage. No retaliation. Not even a snarky comeback. I shook my head slowly. Let her say whatever she wants. She's performing for a crowd that's already walking out the door. Naomi chuckled and bumped my shoulder gently. That's poetic. You should put it on a t-shirt. I smiled, but didn't reply. It wasn't about victory. Not really. Not anymore. It was about space. For years I had chased their approval like a dog chasing headlights. I had written long emails that were never read. I had sat through dinners where my name was an afterthought. I had paid for flights, for events, for emergencies. And when I needed them, when I stood in front of them asking not for money or praise, but just honesty, they turned away. Now I had turned away too. But not to punish. To protect. Naomi handed me her phone. Check this out. It was a video clip already making its rounds. Tessa, face streaked with tears, voice shaky, was ranting into her front-facing camera. She was surrounded by luxury furniture in her Manhattan apartment, clutching a monogrammed handkerchief. Her words were jumbled between sobs. I watched for a few seconds, then looked away. Naomi scrolled further. And look. Comments are not going how she hoped. I glanced again. One comment read, "You mean the sister you publicly humiliated?" Another said, "Funny how consequences feel like betrayal when you're not the one controlling them." Others were worse. Turns out, the public didn't forget the bright cap stunt. Or the sudden board vote. Or the mysteriously missing files Camille had been blamed for. The tide had turned. And I hadn't needed to lift a finger. Owen came out sometime later, squinting into the light, his hair still messy, his face soft with sleep. He walked over, leaned down, and kissed the top of my head. How bad is it? I looked up at him. Not bad. Just loud. He rubbed the back of his neck. Think we'll get peace today, I shrugged. We already have it. Everything else is just noise. We spent the day wandering the beach, eating fresh mango slices from a vendor with a woven basket, and watching kids chase after kites in the wind. Claire and Mateo joined us later for lunch, bringing stories about the local village and a plan to take a cooking class that evening. At some point, my phone buzzed again. It was a photo. No message. Just a photo. From an unknown number. It was of my mother and Tessa sitting in what looked like a lawyer's office. Tessa had her face buried in her hands. Lorraine was staring at something off camera, her expression unreadable. I didn't respond. Claire noticed my silence and raised an eyebrow. You okay? I handed her the phone. She studied the photo for a few seconds, then handed it back. Guess it's finally sinking in. I nodded. There was no satisfaction. No glee. Just gravity. A quiet settling. The kind that happens when a story ends not in fire but in silence. That night, as we lit candles on the deck and passed around grilled seafood and papaya salad, someone asked me what I planned to do next. I didn't have an answer yet. For the first time in years, I didn't have a 5-year plan or a quarterly strategy. I didn't need one, I had truth, and that was enough to build a new kind of life. The stars came out slow, patient, and unbothered. We leaned back in our chairs, let the salt cling to our skin, and said nothing. Because finally there was nothing left to prove. The call came just after breakfast while I was watering the little potted herbs we'd bought from the local market. Camille, it's Megan. Her voice had that rushed, breathless tone that always meant something chaotic was unraveling. They had a fight. Like a real one. Tessa screamed at your mom, said it was all her fault. That she should have stopped you before it was too late. I moved the watering can to the basil and listened. Lorraine screamed back. Told her to stop blaming everyone else. Said, and I quote, "Maybe if you spent half as much time fixing things as you do performing your pain, we wouldn't be here." I leaned against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes for a second. Megan kept going. And get this. Tessa broke a vase. Threw it at the wall. Your mom said she was acting like a toddler in Chanel. That one made me exhale through my nose. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sigh. Did you talk to them? I asked. God, no. I left the second it got ugly, but I figured you should know. It's messy over there. Like really messy. Thanks for the heads up, I said. We ended the call with a few soft words promises to catch up soon. When the line went dead, I set the phone down and stared at the sunlight hitting the tiles. For years I had been the patch. The one smoothing over the fractures with quiet gestures and endless patience. The one planning birthday dinners, writing thank you cards on behalf of people who never said thanks. The one mediating when Tessa exploded and Lorraine imploded. But I wasn't holding the pieces anymore. And it turned out when no one's playing the fixer, the cracks don't vanish. They split. Owen came in carrying 2 coconuts with straws stuck through the tops. Guess what I bartered for, he said proudly. I took one, smiling. You and your tropical hustle. He sipped, then squinted. You okay? Yeah. Just got off the phone with Megan. Let me guess. Drama, glass shattering drama. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. We took our drinks out to the beach chairs and let the morning drift around us. It was quiet except for the soft churn of the tide and the occasional gull. I thought about the scene Megan described. About the raised voices. The blame tossed around like a hot coal. I imagined Tessa's eyeliner smudged, Lorraine's jaw clenched, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Only distance. Naomi texted a few hours later. Her message was short. They're spiraling. No one knows who to aim at anymore. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. In Portland, I had spent years being the designated target. The safe one to blame. The strong one who'd always show up, pick up the pieces, apologize on behalf of others. I had been their emotional buffer. Their insurance policy. Now I was just out. And they were left with each other. Tessa's PR agency issued a vague statement that afternoon. Something about emotional stress and privacy. The usual language when someone wants sympathy without explaining what they did, but the comments beneath it didn't play along. One user wrote, maybe next time don't steal your sister's company and call it ambition. Another said watching rich people implode is wild, especially when the quiet one finally walks. I turned off notifications and flipped my phone face down. The next day, Megan called again. Okay, so I probably shouldn't say this, but your dad asked if you'd consider talking to them. Just to clear the air. I laughed. A dry, short laugh. Did he know? Yeah. Said it's not too late to mend things. That family is family. I paused. And what did you say? Megan hesitated. I said I'd pass along the message. But I don't think they get it. I don't think they realize it's not about a grudge. It's about exhaustion. I smiled. She was younger than me by 7 years, but sometimes she understood more than the rest combined. Thanks for passing it along, I said, but I'm good. Really. That night, Owen and I watched the stars again, stretched out on a hammock strung between 2 palms. He played some quiet music on his phone, and I let my head rest against his shoulder. You ever think they'll change? He asked softly. I thought about it. Not just Lorraine or Tessa, but the system. The machine that let them believe manipulation was survival. That love came with conditions. That silence meant agreement. Maybe. If they ever sit long enough with the pieces to see how sharp they are. And if not, then I'll be over here. With you. Not carrying what isn't mine anymore. He kissed the top of my head. The wind picked up slightly warm and gentle. Somewhere nearby, a group of tourists were laughing over dinner. I didn't miss anything. And the strange part was I wasn't even angry. The absence of rage is sometimes the loudest proof that you're finally free. I held Owen's hand and closed my eyes. Let them shout. Let them spin. I had stepped out of the frame. And from this distance, everything was finally in focus. The chairs were simple white painted rattan with woven cushions, nothing fancy. Just enough comfort for a beachfront gathering. We had no altar, no grand arch of orchids, just the ocean behind us and a row of candles flickering gently along the sand. One chair sat empty near the center. I had placed it there on purpose. A small card rested on its cushion. It read in elegant gold script, Tessa Harland. No one asked about it. No one dared to move it. And that silence, oddly enough, felt respectful. Not afraid, not tense. Just accepting. Naomi walked over barefoot, holding 2 glasses of champagne. She handed me one and smiled. We did it. No scandals, no tears, no fake spotlight. I laughed softly. And no press releases. No crisis management. She looked at the empty chair for a moment, then back at me. You could have left that out, you know. I know, but I wanted to remember what used to matter to me, and what doesn't anymore. We tapped our glasses lightly and drank. Owen was down by the water with my cousin Jacob skimming stones into the waves. A few feet away, Aunt Rose was telling someone how she met her husband on a broken-down bus in the Bronx and nearly left him at a diner for chewing with his mouth open. The laughter around the table came in soft, unforced waves. It wasn't a spectacle, just a celebration of something quiet and rare. I used to think happiness needed a spotlight, applause, recognition. Turns out it just needs space. And truth. And a bit of salt in the air. Naomi leaned in again. You know, we could have eloped. Saved everyone the plane tickets. Maybe. But then you wouldn't have gotten to wear that ridiculous hat. She looked mock offended. This hat is iconic. You look like a very stylish jellyfish. She squinted. You look like someone getting married and acting far too calm about it. I shrugged. I'm not waiting for something to go wrong anymore. That's new. Later during dinner, Owen gave a short toast. Thank you all for being here. Not just physically, but really here. No one had to fly across the world to prove loyalty or make up for anyone else's absence. You came because you love Camille. And that means more than I'll ever be able to put into words. He lifted his glass and turned to me. And Camille, thank you for choosing yourself. And somehow still choosing me. The table clinked with glasses, and for a moment I felt the air tighten with the kind of emotion that needs no translation. After the meal, we moved to the open area near the water. Naomi queued up a playlist. People danced, some barefoot, some tipsy, some just swaying under the fairy lights strung between palm trees. I sat near the fire pit, toes dug into the cool sand. The breeze smelled like coconut oil and grilled pineapple. Someone passed around slices of mango tart. Someone else passed a ukulele. It was messy and unscripted. Perfect. I looked again at the empty chair. There was a time I would have begged her to come. Would have softened everything to make her comfortable. Would have sacrificed the joy in the room just to say we were a whole family. But I was done sacrificing for people who treated love like leverage. That chair wasn't a peace offering. It was a full stop. And oddly, it didn't feel hollow. It felt honest. After everyone had gone to bed, Owen and I walked down to the edge of the water. We didn't talk much. Just let the ocean do the speaking. When we sat down in the sand, I pulled the name card from the chair and looked at it one last time. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad, just clear. I tucked the card into my pocket and rested my head on Owen's shoulder. He squeezed my hand gently. We didn't talk about what came next. We didn't need to. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in reaction. I was just living. And if you've ever been pushed out of your own moment, your own joy, your own life, I hope you find your way back to yourself too. Because you deserve more than to be tolerated. You deserve to be chosen. Freely. Fully. And if you've got a story like that, if you've been erased, overlooked, or underestimated, I hope you'll share it with me, because I think we'd understand each other.